Should we do that?
Yeah.
We better. Someone is gonna be able to be the chair of this group, which means you'll do all this fun stuff. But until then, I'll do it. So we'll talk about the chair stuff later. But it's 6:32, so we'll go ahead and call the first Equity and Inclusion Commission meeting to order, so we can start our conversations in our meeting. On the agenda, the first thing we're gonna do is a roll call, which is essentially just me calling out and letting everyone know who's here. So I'll do, can you help me say your last name?
Bars?
Bars, okay, so I'll say Commissioner Bars, and then she would say present, right?
Yep.
Okay, excellent, so I'll say Commissioner Bars.
Present.
Present. Commissioner Goodkin.
Goodkin.
Goodkin. Commissioner LaGrange.
Present.
Commissioner Vemi Reddy. Present. Commissioner Chan.
Present.
And then Commissioner Philip Crawford.
Present.
Present. And then I'm Antonio and I'm here too, hanging out with y'all. So very cool. And the second thing we always do is receive public comment. So Pat, are you with the public?
I'm not.
You're not with the public. We'll introduce Pat here in a second. So Pat's our city manager. Oh, I love that ringtone. It's totally fun. So no public comment. So then we would, at the next point, we would approve meeting minutes from our previous meeting. Since this is our first meeting, we don't have meeting minutes, so I don't think that we need to do anything with that. And then our next item on our agenda is business items.
Right.
And that's where Pat's gonna do his thing.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. As mentioned, I'm Pat Trudgeon, the city manager. So I'm really happy to be here on the first meeting of the Equity and Inclusion Commission. We're really excited about the work you're all going to do and really appreciate your stepping up to serve the community. It's really important work. We have prioritized equity and inclusion very strongly in the city for at least the 5 years, if not longer, but something that we know we have to be intentional. A few years ago, we created an equity and inclusion manager, which Antonio is that position to really help the organization focus on equity. And so I think you're gonna learn a lot about what the city of Roseville is doing and really help contribute more to what we can do towards equity inclusion for the whole community. It is so, so important. So really appreciate you being here at the table, bringing your voices to the conversation, because we need all of you to help us sort that out. So to be officially official, we need to have you sworn in as commissioners. So what I'll do is ask you to stand up and raise your right hand, and you can hold your little cheat sheet there, and I'll repeat something to you and you repeat back, and then after that, please sign all those documents. So if everybody could stand up. You know, I should have brought my glasses. There we go, okay. All right, so raise your right hand. So I state your name.
Alfred Chan.
Hanukkah Bars.
Do solemnly swear
Do
solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
that
I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
and the Constitution of the State of Minnesota,
and the Constitution of the State of Minnesota,
that I will faithfully, justly, and impartially
and that I will faithfully, justly, and impartially
discharge the duties of the Equity Inclusion Commission
discharge the duties of the Equity and Inclusion Commission
for the city of Roseville, Minnesota,
for the city of
Roseville,
Roseville,
Minnesota,
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the
best
best
of
of
my
my
judgment and ability.
Congratulations, you're official.
No turning back now. y'all.
So if each of you could sign both copies there, and then we'll have Antonio sign. You can take one of those home with you, and then we'll have the other one for the files.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
So if you can just want to collect those here at the end of the meeting.
Perfect, we'll do that.
So once again, I won't take any more of your time. I'm sure we'll see you around. We try to have joint meetings with the city council at least once a year, so you'll be able to interact with the city council. So certainly we'll see you there, but I'm sure we'll see you around the community and all the work you're doing. But thanks again for all your work, and you're in good hands with Antonio, so I'll let him take over the meeting.
Appreciate
Thanks.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very official stuff, y'all. Now we're official. So, very good. Well, we would normally do like a commissioner onboarding at the first meeting, which talks about things like public meeting law, some of the responsibilities that we have as an organization, and you all as a commission representing community. What does that mean? We're gonna not do that tonight. We're gonna do that virtually sometime over the next few weeks. So I'll be communicating with you all via email just to, confirm some dates that work, some dates and times. And then we'll do a virtual meeting to kind of go over that stuff, if that's okay with you all. Is that all right? Yeah. Okay. So I'll talk a bit about that at the end of my our conversation, not my conversation, our conversation. And a couple of things here. So They've got a microphone set up right there. That little green bar thing is a microphone. That's why you don't see any microphones in front of us. So that does catch all of our conversations. So if you're talking, speak up a little bit, and then also talk towards the middle of the table. When we turn around like this and kind of go like that, I think it doesn't catch it as well. So just something to be aware of. You all know where the bathroom's at and things like that. So, and water's all around the corner as well. So there's that piece. And then what else was I going to share with you all? This is really just going to be a conversation. I have something that I like to share with you all, and then along the way, if you have questions, let me know. But it's going to be really informal, just because I think we need to figure out what we want to do and how we're going to do it and how we're going to be effective in doing that. So I want to share with you all some history and how we got to the point where we're at right now, sitting in this seat as an Equity and Inclusion Commission, and where I think we could go as a team here, and Roseville has made some commitments to doing some things. So that's what's on the agenda for the conversation that I like to have tonight. What questions do you all have for me before we start?
Do it.
Sure. Everyone's like, I don't want to ask any questions. Totally cool, no worries. So this is being recorded. So we're on TV right now. You can tell all your friends you're famous. So that's happening. And then they also do transcribe the meeting afterwards as well. So someone's taking meeting minutes for us. So that will be all part of public record. So just so you're aware that you're being recorded and your comments are being recorded as well. So that's that. So what I'd like to do is just share my PowerPoint here if y'all are cool with that. I did not jump into an introduction because I do that. We're going to do that together as a team, not necessarily just me. So let's see here. So we're going to go ahead and kick off the September 2024 Equity and Inclusion Commission. So on our agenda, we shared this a little bit. We got some introductions. I want to hear from you all. We're going to talk about some goals that the city has, give you some equity and inclusion history, talk about our commitment, and then close our time together. I generally think these meetings will probably be over sometime between 7:30 and 8, just depending on what we have on our agenda. As we get into a rhythm of our work and kind of what we all decided we'd like to focus on, that will kind of determine, I think, the length of the meeting times that we'll have. So there's that. So if you all are okay with it, I'm going to jump in introductions, and I can start, and then we'll go around kind of popcorn style. Does that work all right for you all? Yes. All right, cool. So I'm Antonio Montez. I'm the Equity and Inclusion Manager here at the City of Roseville. I started at the end of March, so I'm brand new, especially for government standards. So just hitting my 6 months. Finally feeling like I'm catching my rhythm a little bit, understanding what the city does as an organization, where do we have opportunity to serve community, obviously, but also where do we have opportunity to really focus on equity and inclusion broadly, kind of across the organization, and then kind of more micro level in terms of like a specific thing that could be advanced around our equity and inclusion work. So learning all of this stuff is what I've been doing for the past 6 months, while at the same time planning for what the future could be. So that's my name. That's what I do. A little bit more about me. I was born and raised in St. Paul, so just a little bit south of here. I grew up in the Frogtown community, so that's near and dear to my heart. So yes, I grew up in a really racially and ethnically diverse community with lots of different folks from lots of different backgrounds, and I think that's what is the driver for me and why I do equity and inclusion work, right? Because I've seen many folks that have very similar experiences to me, but not have had same outcomes and opportunities that I've had as they've experienced life. And I feel very fortunate for having a lot of those experiences and opportunities, because I'm able to sit with you today and talk about this really important work when there are many people that I grew up with that didn't get that opportunity. So that's really, I think, at the core of why I have focused on equity and inclusion. It's about transforming systems that generally don't work for people. They don't work for everyone, and sometimes we're intentionally designed to not work for folks, right? So how do we be system interrupters by causing good trouble and thinking about how can we do things differently to serve all members of our community from all different backgrounds and all different lived experiences, right? So that's why I do this work, is because there's not many folks that come from different backgrounds that sit at decision-making tables that can influence the way that city government operates. So that's why I show up in this space and do this work. And I'd say core to my belief around this work is that this is heart work, this is head work, and it's hand work. You have to do all three of those things together. If you do one, like I think about it and I'd like to do that, but you don't have the hand component of it, which is the actual doing of the work, it doesn't work. And if your heart's not in it, it's something that you have to be passionate about and care about, right? So it's kind of a three-piece there. At the same time, working on our individual journeys, because we all have different experiences that have brought us to this table, and then the group journey, the journey that we have together as a team, and then the systems journey. That's like big city Roseville, right? So how are and that's my role, it's not your role, but my role is how do we get those things to come together and do some really impactful, meaningful work is kind of what is core to what I think about this work here. So that's who I am. And we'll do our icebreaker after you give us your name and kind of, let's see here, name and what else should we share? What do y'all want to know about each other? Name and like what part of the city are you in? Name and what you do.
Some hobbies maybe.
Ooh, some hobbies. I like that. Good. So let's do this. Let's do your name. Let's do your hobbies. And we'll leave it there.
My name is Annika Bars. I'm a junior at the Roseville Area High School. I don't really have any hobbies specifically, but I've been trying to learn how to sew. It's not really working out, but yeah.
I'm Gwen Gaitkin. I also go to Roseville Area High School. I like to play the trumpet, and I'm in debate.
Wow, that's impressive. Y'all are impressive.
I know. Being here is
I know.
very
I
impressive.
was not this driven in high school. So
My name is Amanda LaGrange, and my hobbies are that I have a almost 2-year-old dog who I'm obsessed with. So you'll likely, during our time together, hear a lot of dog stories and see dog photos.
My name is Prajwal Vimareddy, but everyone in the United States calls me Praj. I live right next to Lake Owasso, so it's like a 4-minute drive from here. And I really like playing sports. I like any sport, even if I'm really bad at it, play it. I primarily played tennis and soccer in high school, and then very recently I'm learning how to golf, which I'm learning to find that it's a very frustrating sport. And I think I've improved, but my starting point was I used to swing and completely miss the ball, so anything is an improvement from that. So.
My name is Alfred Chan. My hobbies are pickleball, hiking, and volunteering. I actually teach at the YMCA, volunteer there. Also volunteer teach for St. Paul Park and Rec.
very cool.
Gabrielle Phillip Crawford, and I have a 5-year-old, so I don't have a whole lot of hobbies that are still active at this point. But I avid reader, I garden, crochet sometimes, more so when it's cold out, so I'll get into that this winter.
My hobbies, I have 3 kids. One he'll be 20 this weekend. So he's kind of off doing his own thing. He's studying computer science in college. So he's doing really well. I have an 11-year-old who plays a ton of soccer. So you hear lots of soccer stories from me because we're always at a soccer field. And then I have a 3-year-old. So we're across all of the age ranges and developmental phases of what it looks like to be a young person. So they, same like you, I don't have a ton of time for hobbies. So I do try to exercise every morning before work. So that's probably the closest thing that I have to a hobby that I actually practice. And some days are better than others in terms of getting my exercise done. But it's always the goal. So, all right, sweet. So we're gonna get to know each other quite a bit. What I'd like to start with though is I want to hear from folks about what are your hopes and dreams for this group? What if a year from now we're sitting here and we're having another conversation and we say, wow, we really did a lot of really good work. I feel really proud of the stuff that we did. What does that look like and what does it mean to you? And at the same time, what worries you, maybe gives you a little bit of pause as you think about equity and inclusion broadly and government systems. I just want to hear what your hopes, dreams, and worries are. You don't have to start.
Okay, 'cause
You don't have to right away. I don't want you to feel like you always gotta go first. So we could popcorn it. So if you're like, this is what I wanna do, this is what gives me worry, jump in. Otherwise,
I guess I can start because I talked about it in my interview a little bit, but I think 1 year from now, I'd like to look back and say like we had some sort of equity and inclusion impact in kind of every facet of each commission in the city of Roseville, right? So in the finance commission, like, oh, the equity and inclusion impact did this in our commission. Or if you look at the safety commission, oh, the equity and inclusion gave us feedback on this. And we look at each commission and kind of give our feedback and how our commission can add value to them. Because, one thing I think I've realized, working, especially in a large corporation, is that we're very siloed, right? Every commission is probably doing their own thing, and that cross communication isn't there. And I feel like we can kind of facilitate that, being one inclusion in our name, right? My initial thoughts.
how about reservations?
It's a good question. I guess I don't know what I don't know, right? This is like my first experience into government at all, like microphone at the center of the table. So my main reservation is like a lack of understanding, but I think that's all of us, right? I think we're all pretty new to this, and so I think that reservation will probably go away with time and as we learn more about each commission and how Roseville functions overall. Popcorn to someone.
Or someone else can just jump in if you're ready.
I can go. I love what you said about sort of integrating equity and inclusion. I think that's also a hope that I have is not seeing equity and inclusion as a separate thing from other functions of the city government. And I also am hopeful that make movement in the degree to which people living here feel heard or feel that their voices are included. I think my concern is when I have around all kind of DEI activities, which is just trying to figure out how much is real and how much is performative. That's always a concern I have, is just are folks seeing it as we have this commission so we can check a box and say we're doing a thing, or are they really expecting work and engagement? So I'm hoping for the latter.
Thank you.
You can go next, because building off of your concern is my hope that we can have something measurable, so then we can show like it really isn't just a performative thing, that there's some way of measuring the true outcome and where things are moving, whatever that looks like. And my pause is just the minimal interactions I've had with government have moved very slowly. And so I'm just trying to be really grounded in how long it took to probably get to a first ever Equity and Inclusion Commission meeting. And so I'm practicing patience as I come to the table. But also urgency at the same time.
Yes, thank you. That's good.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so what are your hopes and dreams for our Equity and Inclusion Commission? So if a year from now, we're kind of having like a look back meeting, and we're like, this is what we did over the last 12 months. What does success look like? What would be the things that you'd be really proud of? You'd be telling your friends and your family members, like, we did this over the last 12 months.
I feel like I have an answer, but I don't know. Can that also include like what we do inside of schools as well?
For sure.
Okay, something that I want to be able to learn how to be a leader and kind of help in a leadership role with equity and inclusion. I want to see more kids in my school who look like me step up as well and do more leadership things in that sense as well.
Nice. I like that. Thank you. You have any worries?
Currently, like, yeah, I know usually like the Black community kind of have a lot of conflict with each other, so that's kind of one of my worries, is that it will take a long time to actually like make improvements with that. You know what I mean? But yeah, that would be my only concern.
Okay. Thank you.
I am here because of like I did a block party thing, and I think it was like Amanda, and she was handing out these flyers and like telling us to join the High Rec Commission. I don't know if that's still a thing, but and I want to be like a lawyer, and so I figure this would be a really good opportunity to learn how to, or to like do more in my community, and kind of like help people. Yeah, and then I guess my only concern is that I guess I don't really know what I'm doing, but that's the same for everybody. So.
None of us do. Thank you.
I think I have not formulated any dreams or fears yet.
Okay.
And as I prepare for the interview, I did think about some of this. And most of us have been exposed to the subject of diversity and inclusion over our lives in many different forms. And quite often I find out that it depends on where you come from, where your perception are, what fact this really is. It can be interpreted in many, many ways. So it's difficult to find a right way to do things. So I want to walk in to actually understand first and hopefully learn and listen and not have perception as to what we get out of it right at the beginning. Maybe making a small step is a big step already. Status quo. Maybe there's an environment that we can actually accomplish a lot. So I think it has to do with some of us and how we work together also. So at this point, I'm here to learn. I try to force myself to listen more, and hopefully we can positively contribute.
Appreciate that. I'm thankful because a lot of the stuff that you all have brought up are things that I would like to do as well. So to your point around like it being performative, my hope is that we're not in that case, right? You talked about measurable goals and something that we can kind of track back and say, this is what we wanted to do and did we do it or not, right? The one thing about equity and inclusion though is there's not always tangible things that we can always measure. So I think we'll have to do a bit of both and, right? We'll have to find something that we can measure, but also know that it's head, hand, and heart work. And I think someone said something about equity and inclusion is not a separate thing. Was that you who said that?
Yeah, but
Mix of both.
Roseville, is that how you say your name? Yeah. He was also talking about that
So
integration.
that's exactly how I feel, right? Is like equity and inclusion doesn't always have to be some large initiative that we're doing. It can be about the little things when someone's making a decision around a initiative or a project or a goal, whatever it is that they're thinking about is are we thinking about equity on the front end of that, right? So I appreciate that. I love the idea of how do we collaborate and connect across the other commissions. The truth is that this commission has always been the one that has the one previous to this, the EIC, which is what you mentioned, always had most of the representation of the community, right, was on that commission. So how do we connect with the other commissions and think about what does it look like to be in partnership and have an impact in the work that they're doing alongside the work that we're doing. So that's really great. I love the fact that you want to learn to empower young people and leaders in your school. So we have to think about what does that look like and how do we make that happen? Because what's important to me too is that you all feel like your time is valuable here. You're volunteering your time. So I want you to feel like I'm here doing something important. I'm doing something meaningful to me and I'm proud of the work that we're doing. So we'll create this as we go along. We don't always know what we're doing, but we're going to figure it out. So I love the fact that you want to help your community. That's really awesome. So I'm thankful that you're here and thinking about how do you do that. So it's really good stuff. All right, fun icebreaker now. Here's the fun one. You ready? If you met an alien, what would be your elevator pitch? So like a 30-second talk around why they should abduct you. What is it about you that would make you be the person that they would abduct?
I can teach pickleball on the planet.
Ooh, a little healthy
one.
lifestyle. I like it. Good stuff. So pickleball instructor. Got it.
I feel like the alien should abduct me because I think sometimes I can be a very fun person. And so maybe I'll be like a good introduction to the humanity.
Nice.
A connector. Got you. Okay.
I'm a former college professor, so I spend a lot of time explaining a lot of concepts to undergraduates, so a good source of information about in psychology, so good source of information about people.
Tell them how we're thinking.
Yeah, I'll check and try.
Pretty good at cooking Indian food, so maybe if the alien likes spicy food, they'll want to adopt me. I can cook for them.
You always need good food, Braj.
Do you have yours ready?
I think I could teach him how to play the trumpet.
Always need tunes.
I could teach them how to make really bland food.
Oh no.
Okay, on the other side, I made tater tot hot dish this week. I'm not from Minnesota originally, so that's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's like, you're like, now you're Minnesota.
I'm very Minnesotan.
There it is. Can't deny us anymore. I think mine would be, I speak Spanish, so maybe I could do some interpretation for them in English and in Spanish. That might be a value add, I don't know. Like there's a lot of crossover between Spanish and French too, so maybe we could communicate the broader audience. So maybe a translator. That'd be why they pick me. So, all right, sweet. We're always gonna do a fun icebreaker and hopefully like a more relationship builder question. So those are things that I value because this relationship is key to this work. We're not always gonna have the same lived experiences. You talked about that a little bit. And so we need to have relationship though as we work through and navigate through conversations, both with each other and maybe with other commissions. So I always start my meetings with relationships. So just get used to it, sorry. Everyone in my office is like, what question are you gonna ask us today? Actually, that's what Pat said when he walked in, so. All right, here we go. So we're gonna move on. So what are our goals? So today I wanna share with you a little bit about the equity and inclusion journey. So what drove us to get to this point that we're here today. And then I wanna spend some time talking about Roseville's commitment to our work, right? So to your point around equity and inclusion can oftentimes be performative. I think that we've made some solid commitments around equity and inclusion and how are we going to make some impact and measure that? So that's the hope that we'll do that. And then longer range, it's gonna be about building relationship. We talked a little bit about the importance of that. I wanna review and get your feedback on our Strategic Racial Equity Action Plan. That document is in use right now. It's something that they started and happened before I started. And then long range, I'll share with you my roadmap of where I think equity and inclusion work will go across the city, is I want to have departments create equity and inclusion work plans, right? Because what administration, which is my office, does around equity and inclusion is going to be different than what Parks and Recs does. And it's going to be different than what fire does and police do, right? So how do we create plans that are going to be specific to the core services that group offers and then measurable to the community, right? So that's the longer range plan. I'm doing some internal capacity building right now of leaders to just get that muscle going. And then hopefully we'll be able to partner with the department heads and say, hey, these are the things that we think you should prioritize as you're thinking about your services and you want to advance equity and inclusion. So I think that could be a really good partnership for you all. And then along the way, Praj, we're going to be learning about what does the city do, right? Because I work in the city and I still learn new stuff all the time about what the city does. So hopefully by the time we do the department work plans, you all will have a really good understanding of what the city does and what our framework is around equity and inclusion. So, and that's the last piece, learn about city operations and we can be good partners in departments. So that's the long range plan and the today plan. Good? All right, sweet. So history matters. And there's really 5 things that I want to chat with y'all about quickly, which is on the screen in front of you. A little bit about the Human Rights, Inclusion, and Engagement Commission, which is the HRIC. The Government Alliance on Racial Equity, which is oftentimes referred to as GARE. Talk a little bit about my position, the Equity and Inclusion Manager. Talk about our Strategic Racial Equity Action Plan just a little bit. It's a 25-page document, so we're not going to go deep into that tonight. Don't have enough time. And then we'll end with the Racial Equity Dividends Report, which is a project that we participated in recently. So the Human Rights, Inclusion, and Engagement Commission, which is the commission that was predated this one. And so as many government, as many government agencies kind of started to recognize the importance of not only just, making sure that roads were clear and there were parks that are nice and things like that. Many of them formed a human rights commission of some sort, right? And that was before the human rights initiatives really were centralized at a kind of a higher level of government. There was local commissions that were kind of the responsible partners for saying, hey, I walked into, I don't know, some business and I was discriminated against, or whatever the case is, right? So that was the start of human rights stuff and the commission. At some point in time, after the state really took the lead in terms of human rights violations and things like that, there was this understanding that, hey, we need to be inclusive and we need to engage community in our decision-making processes, right? So like you talked about being a leader and showing up and things like that. So when our departments were, building a road or building a park or, doing whatever they were doing, they realized that they needed to engage community, right? So as we started to focus more on that, there became this kind of mesh of human rights and inclusion and engagement initiatives that kind of came together to make the Human Rights Inclusion and Engagement Commission. And as you can imagine, that maybe wasn't super clear to folks when they joined the commission, right? If you wanted to be around human rights stuff or you wanted to be more engagement stuff, which maybe are two different interest areas, right? There just wasn't really a clear vision. But what was clear is that this was always about a resource for the community, right? How are we serving the community and how are we in relationship with the community? So that was always clear. And obviously that has evolved and changed as needs have changed for our community, right? What Roseville looks like today is not the same Roseville that was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. For folks that have been around that long, it's changed quite a bit, right? So as we've refocused, I still plan to have the Equity and Inclusion Commission, which is what we are today, be a resource for the community and always continue to evolve because our community changes and evolves every day. But it's about focusing on how can we be good partners as a city government agency and how can you all hold us accountable as community members to say we need to ensure that equity and inclusion are central and key to the work that you all are doing and all the decisions that you're making. Because I can say that, but it's a lot better when it comes from you all as folks that are not your community members. So that's kind of how the Human Rights and Inclusion Engagement Commission came about and started this wave of what are we doing in government in terms of reducing harm. You talked about that, Amanda, some harmful experiences with government that many community members have experienced, both here and many other government agencies, right? So that's kind of the first step on our journey around equity and inclusion. After that, the Government Alliance on Racial Equity is an organization that really kind of came about strongly developing framework for systems change with a focus on racial equity in the 2010s. And many government agencies partnered with the Government Alliance for Racial Equity to really go through exercises to prioritize the work that they're doing and how do they develop a racial equity work plan, right? So what that means is that you looked at as an organization the things that you do and how can you advance racial equity in those things. So you created these work plans. So as you can see, Roseville started in 2018 on their journey with Government Alliance for Racial Equity, and they created a work plan. And what's really great about that is it showed that the leadership, Pat talked about prioritizing it and making sure that it's important, it's on the forefront. But what's not really great about that is it's always harder to do it than it is to put it on a piece of paper, right? So as the agency created this work plan, which said we want to do these things, the realization came that many folks have like other full-time jobs like leading public works or like leading the city or leading community development. And oh, by the way, do equity work as well, right? And so what we realized as an organization was we need to commit some resources to this. We need to commit whatever that looks like, resources. We need to commit to this so that we can make it happen instead of it just being a document that sits on a shelf and collects dust as we think about our racial equity work. And y'all can stop me whenever you like or if you have any questions. So that led to our equity and inclusion manager position. So you all see that's my picture up there. That's when I joined the organization. But this position actually was created in 2021. So it was intentionally created to allocate a resource to equity and inclusion but also to help us operationalize, to make happen the things that were in the work plan. So the first ever equity and inclusion manager here at City of Roseville was Thomas Brooks. You may have heard his name or maybe have met him in the past, but he did a lot of really great work here in the organization and laid some good foundational plans around what should the organization focus on. What are the things that City of Roseville can do that can be measurable, that we can look back in a year or 2 or 5 and say, these are the things that we wanted to do. How did we do against those things? So Thomas really led that initiative, which is really great. It gave me something really, really like tangible that I could walk into and help move forward as we think about our work here. So again, I started in March and I've been here since then and learning a ton as I've just gotten to know the city of Roseville. So that happened in 2021.
A quick question, was there a period of time between Thomas and you?
Question. Yeah, so there was. So, that's a good one. I came in spring of 24, and I want to say the position had been vacant for about a year. Ish. So I think Thomas left in the spring of 2023. Yeah, so it sat for a while, and so that's been a part of some of the work is picking that back up and getting it reintegrated back into the organization and trying to help lead that throughout the city of Roseville. So we're on that journey right now, and yeah, so you'll see a little bit more about that in a second, but that's a great question. Any other questions? No? All right, sweet. So after Thomas laid some foundational work here, one of the big pieces that came out of that was the Strategic Racial Equity Action Plan. And what that is a work plan, essentially, for our equity and inclusion work. So it's actually 23 pages. I misspoke earlier, I said 25. It's a 23-page document. We're gonna spend more time in our next meeting really going through that document and really kind of sitting with it. I can send it out to you all, the link, before the next meeting, and if you'd like to take a look at it, just kind of review it, bring any questions forward that you have, that'd be cool. If not, that's totally cool too, no big deal. So we'll spend some time going through it, but what I'll call out from that document is the city did a comprehensive review about its work, made some commitments in the document around equity and inclusion, right? So that was, there's 9 of those, so we'll share those. I think I've got them on another slide. There's 9 of those, and there were 3 problem statements. I like to call them goals, though I don't like the language problem statements. It feels, I don't know, this isn't a problem, it's an opportunity, right? So there were 3 things that came out of that, and the things that came out of that were a representative workforce, so a workforce that looks and is representative of the community that we serve, right? A representative boards and commissioner team, so you talked about that a little bit, Raj, right? So are the commission, so the Finance and Safety Commission and the Parks Commission, are those commissions representative of the community that we serve? And then the last piece was this racial equity toolkit. So there's a toolkit document, kind of a questionnaire, if you will, where when decision makers are making decisions about policies or they're making decisions about projects or goals or budget, they have questions that they have to answer around, how does this impact communities and what could be an impact, what should we do to mitigate that impact, make sure that it's not as bad. So that was kind of the third problem statement that came out of.
I have a question
Yeah.
on some of the wordings.
Yeah.
This is the first time I think about it. It's called strategic racial equity. The first one is equity and inclusion. It feels to me that racial is just one part subset of equity and inclusion because there's a broader subject. So is this word limiting the vision of this goal?
It's a great question. I'm opening the floor. The folks have thoughts, and we're building relationship here. Or if not, I want to hold some space. And if not, that's okay too. Just don't want to jump in it.
My 2 cents would be, I feel like typically in Minnesota, race is the biggest area of difference. So even though there's plenty of other places of difference, like I don't have children. You have children, right? Like we may show up in the world and look very similar and our lives are still different. But when it comes to the topic of race within areas of difference, it feels like the biggest gap in our community.
I would say I think sometimes when we don't target equity initiatives to address a particular specific concern, sometimes it can just end up watered down and ineffective if we're just going. It kind of ends up like a colorblind ideology, which is problematic for many reasons, but it kind of ends up as well, we'll just treat everybody the same and it'll be fine, but the systems don't actually functionally do that. And as Amanda's saying, I do think Minnesota is second worst in the nation when it comes to racial inequity in healthcare and education. So I can see this as a starting point, that it's not the be all and end all of what we need to do, because there are a lot of other issues. But I do think we have to actively target racial equity and say that as part of it. So yeah, incomplete, but good to kind of call it out and target it would be my take.
You don't have to, but I just, you all are active members of the commission as well, so you have an equal say here, so. I'm not so equal too. I think you raise a great point, right? Are we forgetting other parts of our community as we talk about racial equity? And I think that's always going to be some of the conversation. Is racial equity too narrow, and are we dismissing other parts of our community, whether it's your gender, whether it's your orientation, whether it's your religion, whether it's your socioeconomic situations, right? I think that those are all things that we do see those disparities, to your point. And I also want to lift up that generally when you layer in some of those other communities that experience disparities and then layer in race, oftentimes it gets deeper, right? So if we're looking at a gender disparity and then we layer in race with that gender disparity, generally there's going to be an even worse disparity with race layered in with the gender, right? So I think you bring up a great point, and it's something that I would love for us to continue to talk about as we're moving this work forward broadly. But I hear you and I see you, and I think we will talk about equity and inclusion broadly. We want to make sure that things like accessibility are important and front of mind when we're consulting with other commissions and when we're consulting with department heads about projects and things like that. But also, to your point, recognizing that race is a thing and we also have to focus on that as well. So the answer is, I think, both and, if that's okay. How do you feel?
This is a question. I don't have an answer. Because the words that pops up in equity inclusion, you say that in fact age would be one of them. I'm so happy to see you two here. I'm so happy representing the school, representing the age group. So it was, to me, just equity. To me, just feel that race is a subset of the equity inclusion. And rather than when I saw that on the top, it kind of is not in the right order to me. I agree that there's things we should focus and target. Maybe the decision process and discussion process say, let's look at the broad spectrum of things that we should look at. And then maybe depends on the gaps we have and depends on what the needs are, then we work towards 2 or 3 goals. I understand we cannot work on everything. You work on everything, nothing gets done. So that's just a question. When I saw that's my reaction.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's about as clear as mud as anything with equity and inclusion. But what I would share is that the document itself is called the Strategic Racial Equity Action Plan. Like, that's what the document is titled. So that's why I put that here. And then I think Equity and Inclusion Work Plan, which, to your point, I think is the broader strategy around the entire organization. So I think the answer is both and I think yes, I hear you.
And the toolkit is a racial equity toolkit.
It is, yes, it is. That's what it was initially, that's what it was called out in the Strategic Racial Equity Action Plan. And so more to come. We're gonna talk about language in our next session. It felt like it would be a lot in our first session to be like, here's a dictionary, boom. No, I'm not gonna give you a dictionary, that's a bad joke. But we will talk about what does this mean, right? So, because when we say the word equity, how many, there's 7 of us here, right? Not a math major, but there's 7 of us. So if I say the word equity, we probably each have a different understanding or definition that equity means this, right? When we think about inclusion, it means this. When we think about accessibility, it's gonna mean that, right? So, so we need to get on the same page, for lack of a better term, around what does it mean when we say these things, but also what does it mean when we say these things in Roseville? Because Roseville has a framework that we talk about equity and inclusion, right? So, so that'll come. We're gonna get there. I again just felt like might have been a little aggressive if we got there right away. Y'all might have been like, I'm never going back to see him again. So, so we're gonna build and we're going to have conversations. So I appreciate this question because it's important. And my answer is both and. And as we build more collective shared understanding around this work and what it means and how we're gonna do it, I think that some of this will become a little more clear. Is that fair? Okay, good question though, I appreciate it. So yes, Equity Toolkit is a kind of a questionnaire that just helps us make decisions. So, so there's that. So this is the Racial Equity Dividends Report was a initiative that was led by the Center for Economic and Inclusion, which is an organization based in St. Paul, and they do a lot of work around really wealth building and lots of work with government agencies. And so they pulled together this report for a bunch of local government agencies, well, pretty much any government agency that will participate, and some private sector agencies. And they basically asked a bunch of questions. And it was really about how is your racial equity work structured in your organization. So City of Roseville responded to this questionnaire, and what Center for Economic Inclusion did was gave each participating organization a grade relative to other agencies that are local and close to you, both in like size and in scope and things like that. So they kind of compared you to your peers based on the answers that you provided. So that happened in 2023. I haven't had the chance to really get into that yet and start using that. But that's something that I think as we think about the work that we're going to do as a team here with the organization, I think this could be a really good tool, like a measuring tool, right? To say, here are the opportunities that were recommended to us, but also here's some opportunities that we see to be able to move equity and inclusion forward. So that's something that's out there, and we're working to figure out how do we include it. And now we're here today on September 18th, 2024. Currently 7:20 p.m. That's where we got to be right here, right now. What questions do y'all have for me? This is a lot, I understand that too, so if you don't have any right now, that's okay.
Is that a report on the website?
That's a great question. I don't know that it's on the website yet. Like I said, the position was vacant for about a year or so before I got here. So I know that we have our report. I don't know that we've been able to digest it in a meaningful way yet to really get into it and review it. So more to come as that happens, but it's there.
Is there a high-level summary that says what was the finding and what are the top things that?
Yeah, there's like an executive summary.
Is there something that this group can take a look?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, my plan is to think about how do we use this as well as the Racial Equity Action Plan and the stuff you all want to do as a team, and figure out how do we combine all this stuff together to go in the same direction, right? That's kind of my hope. So yes, I'd love to share that with you all. Take a note on that, sorry. Any other questions about anything that we talked about so far? Which is a lot, I recognize. Sorry. All right, well, we'll keep moving then. So, the other piece that I thought was really important for you all, and as I've started in this role, to your point around equity and inclusion not being something that's like done in a silo, done away from our everyday work, how do we ensure that this work is really embedded into our organization? I always talk about this as the community has told us what they want, right? So are you all familiar with the community aspirations here at Roseville? Yeah, kind of. Okay, I'm still learning them too, so it's all right if you're not. It's totally cool. But so City of Roseville went through a community engagement initiative essentially where we asked residents, hey, what do you want from your government agency? What are the key things that you want? And so from that, I think there were 8 aspirations, 8 or 9, and we're gonna look at them all. That community said, hey, these are the things that we want from you, right? And so my goal is always, how do we embed equity and inclusion into the community aspirations so that, again, it's not just, here's Antonio, the equity and inclusion guy, and when he walks in, we do equity and inclusion. Because if that's the case, then I failed, right? It's not effective, nor is it like, can we sustain it? So how do we embed it into the work that we do every day? So first thing is community aspirations. So the first aspiration is that we want to foster a strong sense of community through effective and inclusive communication, engagement, and collaborative decision-making. And to me, the most important thing there is collaborative decision-making, right? Because like you can hear and engage from folks, but if we're not letting them help us make decisions, then are we really being inclusive and effective, right? So you're gonna hear a lot from me around how do we share power. That's my language that I naturally use. How do we share power in decision-making as we're thinking about the work that we're doing? The second aspiration is, hey, we want to be welcoming and inclusive, right? So of all the people, regardless of whatever identity they carry, whether that's country of origin, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual preference, age, physical disability, or socioeconomic standing. These are the things that community asks us, is we want to be welcoming and inclusive. So a city where all people feel safe and secure, where there's mutual trust and respect between police, fire, and emergency responders. I will share that I'm really proud. I think that our police team has a really strong relationship with community. There's not many places that I go when I'm out in the community where folks tell me bad things about police, which I think is really cool. And so I'm really proud of that as an organization. I think our team has done a really great job. Chief has done a really great job, and her team. The next one was a thriving and diverse neighborhood with quality housing and businesses that meet the needs and provide opportunities for all people, right? So again, how are we serving everyone in our community? Not just the folks that have always been served, how are we serving everyone? So that's important. We want to embrace diversity, specifically through multicultural public programming, public gathering spaces, and parks in ways that are suitable for all people regardless of age, ability, or access to information. So again, to me, that's what equity and inclusion is, right? Is that folks are represented and also in the know about what's happening. We want to treasure and preserve natural areas and open space, right? That's really important to us. It's what communities told us. Environmental conservation and sustainability, right? We know that that hasn't always been the case, and we know that that's not always done equitably when you think about things like, environmental pollution and where does stuff that no one else wants get put. It's oftentimes not in our most economically advantaged areas, right? So how are we being equitable and inclusive as we think about our community now and into the future? And then the last two, a community that's economically prosperous with a stable and broad tax base, vibrant small businesses, high quality employment, and a range of retail and entertainment options. So I know one thing that our economic development team is doing is really thinking about how are we ensuring that folks from all different backgrounds are able to participate in our economy and own businesses and things like that. So that's important and it's a part of our culture and identity. And then a safe, inclusive, and well-connected transportation system and infrastructure that supports health and well-being of residents. Customers, businesses, employees, regardless of ability, access, cultural background, or socioeconomic standing. So I'd love to hear from you all. What do you think themes are and the aspirations, and how does it tie back to our Equity and Inclusion Commission?
Something that I noticed was kind of repetitive was building our community together, and in so many different kind of ways we can do that. So we have to start little by little, but eventually we'll get this huge end result.
I think also back to what Amanda said earlier, a lot of this is measurable.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot in here that we can actually track improvement over time.
How about others? Anything you wanted to lift up or call out? I can go back to. They're kind of wordy, but
How do these get measured currently? Like, because, I mean, clearly we're one commission, there's plenty of other work being done. That's a good question.
we're working on it.
Yeah.
As an organization. So you may have seen if you've watched any of the commission council meetings recently, we're working on a strategic plan right now. So what does that strategic plan look like and what are we gonna prioritize as an organization? So that's kind of underway right now. And I hope that some of the stuff that you just asked comes out of part of that project is how are we doing these things? More to come.
Because there's specific departments assigned to each of, like, how does this turn
Yeah.
into city life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's a lot of crossover, right? Like I see parks in a lot of these. I see community development. You talk about housing, you talk about business, you talk about economics, right? Finance is also a part of that. As an organization, we spend money, we contract for services, so we're a part of that as well, like big city operations. I see my work in a lot of this, right? A lot of like, regardless of your ability, regardless of your age, regardless of your background, your economic status, right? So I see my work across a lot of these. Our emergency response, both fire and police are in a few of these, right? How are we doing this and ensuring that folks are safe? So I think there's not always one clear department that's like, this is our specific, because even like the one like transportation,
Right.
right? But like, there's a component of emergency response to that too, right? How are we responding to things that are in part of our infrastructure system, right? If something is blocked or whatever the case is, like when those trees came down in that storm that we had, right? How did parks come out and help clear, and how did public works get out and help clear, right? So, I think we're working on how are we measuring these things a little bit more effectively, and so more to come as we.
I think part of that's also like how is data shared across different agencies within Roseville, because I would bet most of the information in there is already being measured and there's administrative data that relate. So I'm a policy researcher, that's my day job. There's probably already administrative data on most of this.
Yeah.
But is it in data system silos within, does police share data with the parks system, or is there somebody who's pulling this together and matching it up and figuring out, how it relates to these aspirations?
100%.
I think the word aspiration is really broad, and these are all wonderful things.
Yeah.
It is not a to-do list by December 31st, 2024. So I think it would be good to have a understanding at some point of time, out of this, what is the list? Who owns it? How is it measured? When? How it's being funded? And what resources besides money is needed? So that's kind of on the big topic, but back to us is what is our role in contributing to part of it? This thing would probably not be all done. Not all be all done in a certain period of time. So I think we have to be patient with it and understand what can we impact, and what is important that we have to impact. Because the word is aspiration, not get it done list.
I love that. I think we impact that by having this conversation right now, right? By saying, how are we measuring this? What does that look like? What data is available to us now? How are we reporting it? Sharing the information out and saying this is what it looks like. So it's good stuff.
I think how everybody should feel safe in your community. I think that's important because most of my friends, they moved from not inner St. Paul, but a less safe community than Roseville is, and I feel like most of that is like the people living in Roseville, and so we can't really change everybody to make them perfect and kind and stuff, But I think that's really important. And also what he said about the money. There's all of these clubs and stuff in at the high school, and they all cost $500 just to do them. And so I think that maybe that's most kids can't do that.
Yeah, that's pretty expensive. Okay, it's good to know. We're in my role, I've been building a relationship with the school district and learning the folks over there that are, doing the work alongside our school partner. So that's good to know. I just actually met with their main contact a couple weeks ago. So that's good to know. I can chat with him about what's that about.
I think that is something that I also want to look at more, right? The impact of schools, because I think you have to start from a young age. If you think about poverty and a lot of the issues, a lot of it's cyclical, right? And if you have things it costs a lot of money, even in public schools, I think it causes more issues. For example, when I went to a public high school in Kentucky, and I think it's crazy that kids and teachers aren't giving the adequate funding to buy paper towels or tissues or notebooks or this. And I'm okay, for a private school, colleges, I understand it's more expensive, but I think to put that resources on a child just trying to get an education, I think is crazy. And again, of course, every state is different, every school district is different, but I think that's one thing definitely, it's not just about race, it can be about age, socioeconomic status, and I think that's something we can also try to prioritize. And I think you too, because you actually go to school, I think you can definitely have a better voice in that, actually talk about what's happening in the schools. So.
Thanks for that.
One thing about the school.
Yeah.
So the school lunches are I think I talked to somebody last year about this, but the school lunches, I like that they're free, and most of it is healthy, but I feel obviously the school district doesn't have all the money to buy all the good food, or the healthy food. But I know looking at the ingredients on most of the foods that have wheat and are dairy, the milks, the chocolate milks, they all have carrageenan, which is a carcinogen and it causes cancer. And then these kids are drinking it every single day for breakfast and lunch because that's what they can eat. So I don't know, because there is different options for that kind of that chocolate milk, but it's another thing.
Thank you for sharing that. Take some notes, sorry. I type faster than I write, y'all. All right. Thank you. So, how do we measure these? How are we sharing that information? How are we compiling the data that's out there? More to come. This is a good table though to ask that question and push us to thinking about how do we measure them and talk about it. Good feedback. Thank you. Any other questions about aspirations? Okay. So community aspirations helps us, I think, broadly prioritize our equity and inclusion efforts in the city, but also makes it so that it's not something that happens in a silo or off on its own or when a specific person is in the room. Another part of our commitment right now to equity and inclusion work, not only did community ask us to say, hey, make sure you're doing this for all folks that, you know, race and gender and age and ability and economic status, all those things that we've talked about are that they're not a barrier. But also the city of Roseville came and said, hey, we want to commit to an inclusion and respect statement that says the city of Roseville strives to be a welcoming and inclusive place for all. We're committed to promoting respectful conduct, equitable service, and diversity in our community. We condemn discrimination by or against residents, visitors, workers, city employees, or city businesses. In all that we do as a city government, we pledge to treat everyone fairly, respectfully, and without bias, regardless of their color, creed, religion, national origin, gender, marital status, familial status, immigration status, sexual orientation, age, income, or disability. And I'm proud of this because, like, not only did community tell us, hey, we want to do all these things and be equitable and inclusive, but also the city as an organization came out and said, not only are we going to do this, like, internally with, like, employees of Roseville, but we're also going to expect that visitors and residents and workers and city employees and city businesses also are adhering to and or like making sure that this is happening as they're doing business or working, you know, live, work, play, right, in the city of Roseville. So this is another really core piece, I think, to the work that we're doing both here at this commission, but also as an organization, and why equity and inclusion work matters and why it's important.
Do you know when this statement was first, even if it wasn't when it was first drafted, but when it was first rolled out?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know the exact date. I could ask. If I had to bet, it's probably sometime between 2021 and 2023.
Yeah, so in the last couple of years.
Yeah. I mean, as you all know, right, like we're at a point in our society broadly, I think, not just in Roseville, but just society broadly where this kind of thing around equity and inclusion is kind of a new thing, right? I mean, 10 years ago, we weren't talking about equity and inclusion. 15 years ago, you just didn't talk about it. So I'm excited about that because we've always needed to talk about it, but it hasn't been something that, generally speaking, most folks were willing to talk about and being participants in the conversation. And I think now we're at a point in our community, in our society, in our country, where we're ready to have conversations about, like, what does this mean and how do we do it tangibly, not necessarily just something that's out there in the abyss.
One thing I like in this is I feel like there's often in equity and inclusion work, it feels like there's more focus on removing barriers, which is very important. But you also need to be not just blocking people from engaging, but encouraging them to engage, like providing ways for people to be sort of pulled into the conversation. So I like that this feels more
Proactive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's about challenging us to go beyond the expectation of just saying, hey, everyone can walk into City Hall and get information, right? You can come to this board right here and see all the meetings that are gonna happen, right? Well, how many folks wanna come to City Hall? Not a lot, right? So how do we ensure that we're doing the extra step of making sure that we're communicating those things, folks know about it, that we have contacts in the community, elders in the community that we can say, hey, this is happening, we'd love for you to show up, we'd love for the community to know about this. So I think that that's the piece. But I think you all have talked about many a times, sometimes things happen slowly and we gotta focus on what we can control now and grow that influence, and I'm really encouraged because I appreciate that. How do you think, Alfred, I'm thinking about, you talked about things being too narrow in the Racial Equity Action Plan. How do you feel about this particular statement? Does it feel?
Well, I have not fully digested it yet.
Yeah, it's long.
But I think one thing I spot is, as you talk about treat everyone fairly, respectfully, and then the color creed, it seems that list of things changes in every different
It does,
state.
doesn't it?
Socioeconomic status would be another one. So I think we can get past that because we try to have all the right words in it. The only thing I would say is, when I moved here for 3 years ago, when we get at home the Roseville newsletter, actually I'm very excited to see this city actually put most of this on print. I read about it, hey, they actually talk about it. Not that they don't bury it. It didn't talk much about what was accomplished, but my reaction was being done. And I would have to say that I do read it, but I did not really read that things have been accomplished, except when you were hired. It was like a big accomplishment, I think. And so hopefully as we move forward, the accomplishment will be put forth. So when I read it again a year from now, you say, hey, the city of Roseville accomplished these 2 or 3 things. That would be fun to do.
I appreciate that. I could tell you they're anxious. They wanted to write an article about us already. I said, let's do some work first. Let's do some work first. Let's get to know each other a little bit. But maybe in a couple of editions we'll come back. So they're planning to come, and I hope that we could tell some really great stories around the work that we've done. So, good stuff. All right. So, we talked about this a little bit, the Strategic Racial Equity Action Plan. I wanted to bring it back up because it is one of the documents that's kind of foundational to both where we were, but also where we're going. So we called out 3 problem statements, I like to call them goals, that the city wanted to work on, and that was representative workforce that reflects our community. So how are we, what's our makeup of folks that have, they're racially ethnically diverse, our gender, our orientation, our why am I blanking on the other piece of the ability, right? So how are we making sure that folks are representative and they're in decision-making capacities? That's kind of always my challenge, right? Is like, yes, we could be representative, but are folks that are in decision-making roles representative of our community, right? Because those are the folks that decide on budgets and decide on resources and decide on employment, right? So we need to make sure that that's happening. Same thing for our boards and commissions. Are they reflective of the community? And then we're utilizing that equity toolkit is something that was really called out. So we're gonna dive into the Strategic Racial Equity Action Plan in our next meeting because it's a lot. There's a lot there. I'll share that with you all as well. And it's on our website so you can see it pretty quickly and pretty easily. But it calls out a lot. And we made 8 or 9 commitments, which again, I'm not gonna spend a ton of time on. It's already 7:45. There's never enough time. So I wanna get us out of here on time. But we're gonna get into this in our next meeting. So let's see here. So I wanted to share with you all my long-range equity plan that I've submitted to Pat, who's our city manager. I presented it to the city council, and everyone's like, yes, go do it. So here's the work that I'm doing on a daily basis and advancing equity and inclusion across the organization. So first step was y'all, was getting a partner in the community at a community table that's gonna do the things like y'all are doing right now, which is ask really good questions and challenge us to say, how are we measuring things? How is this data shared right now? How are we doing these things? What does this mean? Because I can think I have really great ideas, but we do better work when we're together. So I'm excited to partner with you all as I do my daily work, but also the work that we're gonna focus on as a commission. So that was the first step on my long-range equity plan, was to get this team together. The next step was to stand up our equity and inclusion steering team here in the organization. And so that's all of the key department leaders in the organization that have decision-making power, influence, that can really support our work at a high level in the organization. So I bring that team together once a month, and we talk exclusively about equity and inclusion stuff. So we're on a learning and development journey. We're building the muscle to normalize equity and inclusion. How do we talk about it? How do we say it? How do we say things like race in front of people, right? Whether it's the council or whether it's community members, and be empowered to have informed conversations about it, right? Because as you all know, like I said, this is kind of something that's new to government, right? Is being able to talk about these things. So I want to empower leaders to be able to do that on their own, but also because I need more than just me doing it. If I'm the only one doing it, then no one's gonna like me. So, no, I'm joking. Everyone likes us, so we get along well. But so that team has stood up, and we've been meeting now. We've had 4 meetings, I think, and so we're we're having a lot of fun. We're building a lot of relationship. We're having some hard conversations, and the team's doing well. So
So you meet with them once a month?
Yep.
And then it's a leader of each of the city departments?
And did that exist in the previous structure? Okay. So it's really, really new.
yeah, it's a new initiative. We're focusing on practicing. We're focusing on normalizing, because you have to say it and be able to talk about it before we can actually do it, right? So building that muscle. All my leaders care about equity and inclusion, and they prioritize it, and this is just empowering them to continue to do that. So that team's up and going. The next piece is the action team, which is the equity and inclusion action team. So I'm going to be standing that up. I'd like to do that by September now, end of October, beginning of November. So this is a cross-functional team that'll include members from all of our city departments at multiple levels of the organization. So we've got the leaders on the steering team, but we also know that there are leaders in the organization that are not always leaders by title, right? So that'll be the folks that are on the equity and inclusion action team that will, one, help me build capacity, because I'm one me. There's not enough of me to serve all of our organization. So hopefully we'll be able to build some capacity in different parts of the organization, and also recognizing that people hear things differently from folks that have similar lived experiences, right? So if I go into a department that I've never been on a maintenance crew in public works, and if I go in there and I want to talk about equity and inclusion, they're like, hey, there's this guy from the office. They may not hear it from me like they maybe would from someone that's been on a maintenance crew in public works. And I don't mean to pick on public works. We could do the same thing for community development, right? You don't know anything about community development and urban planning and all these things, right? So you haven't sat in community meetings where people are mad about a zone of their property or whatever, right? So it's about building capacity both across our organization, but also within the departments to really continue to do this work in a meaningful way, which is going to help them set up, you'll see here in a second, the employee resource groups, right? So as you all know, we need employees to do our work, and it's a more competitive workforce job market than it's ever been, right? When you think about things like remote work, and you think about things, there's just so many things we could talk about this for an hour, but I won't. But we want folks to feel connected and supported, and have opportunities for learning and development and mentorship and all these things. So one thing I would like to do is start some employee resource groups, right? So that's coming. That's probably Q1 of next year, though, if I'm being realistic and honest, just because it takes a lot of effort and a lot of energy. And it also requires folks in departments that this is not their work. So I need partnership, right? So that's why it's coming after the action team, because hopefully I can identify some partners that'll help me do that in their departments. And the action team is also going to be really critical, as you all are as well, in the departmental equity and inclusion action plans. So we have the Strategic Racial Equity Action Plan that kind of is the equity and inclusion work plan for the organization. That doesn't always mean that it's the work plan for a department. And departments have different needs and have different opportunities to advance equity and inclusion. So I want them to do their own work plans that will be connected to, but not like a one-for-one exact same as our organizational wide equity and inclusion action plan. So that's probably I'd like for those to be Q2 of 2025. Now, I also recognize my departments are super busy. There's just so much going on. But I'd like for them to be Q2, Q3 of next year, with a plan for like operationalizing by the end of 25, beginning of 26, like starting to do the actual work, right? We got to call the plans out, develop the plans, and then commit resources and things like that. That'll help us do it.
You say my department, what does that mean?
So I'd love for each department, I'd love for Public Works to have a equity and inclusion work plan, because what that looks like could be very different than what it looks like in, like I said, administration, right? It can be very different.
So do you have a department that have staff that support you?
I do not. I'm a team of one.
Okay.
So so that's what some of this will depend on. How can we build capacity within the action team that will hopefully bring departments in, and so that those folks will be aligned with our framework around equity and inclusion, understand their own work and how their department works, and then hopefully they'll have a good foundation for building a work plan for their department. That's the hope. We're pretty lean. You all will see. We're gonna get into, I'm gonna share with you all, I think it's on our next meeting, some of the like city, like org chart, essentially, like the organizational chart. Roseville's a pretty lean organization. We have 225 employees, which sounds like a lot. I came from Ramsey County. We had 4,000 employees, almost 5,000 when you hired seasonals and temporary workers. So it's a really lean organization, which is great, but it also means we do a lot with a little of employee resource. So this is the long-range equity and inclusion plan, and I hope that you all will hold me accountable as I'm working through our daily work, and you all are like, hey, you said that you thought this would be up by now. Is it up? And I've got to come here and be like, actually, I didn't. So I want you all to be an accountability table for me and push me. So there's that. Any questions? Okay, it's ambitious, but I like to be ambitious, so we'll work through it. All right, this is great. It's 7:52. Next steps. So we have to have a chair and a vice chair of this group. The chair will work closely with me, and work closely means like we'll talk once, maybe twice outside of this meeting to make sure that we're on the same page around what are we going to talk about at the next meeting, what do we want to prioritize. You'll also do like the introduction piece where we'll make sure I'll do roll call, but then you'll like, is there any public comments? You'll do the approval of meeting minutes. So you'll kind of do like the Robert Rules of Order, if you will, for the meeting. That's the chair position. And the vice chair is generally kind of the records keeper for the organization. So we need to elect a chair and a vice chair. So just give it some thought. If you're interested, send me an email. You know how to get a hold of me. So that'll be our next meeting. We want to do a virtual new commissioner orientation, which will again just talk about kind of the what's the word I'm looking for? The rules around the commission, right? Like public meeting law. You can't meet quietly or separately without being like it being noticed to the public. There's just kind of some important rules that we have to share with you all. So we'll go over some of that stuff. So I'll send y'all an email to try to figure out what days and times work well for you. That'll again be virtual. You can do that from wherever you have internet connection. And then our next meeting is Wednesday, October 16th. So it'll be here at City Hall, 6:30 p.m. And I'll send you all the agenda. I got it out a little bit late this month. I'm sorry about that. My goal is to do it at least a week before so that you have all the information you need. If you have any questions, we can make sure those are answered.
Do you happen to have meeting days out a period of time that you can send a calendar invite so this all is on our calendar?
I can do that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, generally it is this is the third Wednesday, right? Yes, it's the third Wednesday of every month. That's when we meet. But I can send a calendar invite out if that helps.
In the event someone has to be somewhere else traveling or sick, do you have option to conference in?
Great question. We have the technology. Let me ask. Yeah, let me ask.
I won't be able to be at the next one. Can I send questions or
Absolutely.
anything, comments or anything to you beforehand to share?
100%, yes, please. That'd be great.
I can't conference and for it all.
No, it's all good.
Time.
It's all good.
So.
Generally speaking, we've done these in person. That's been the response from the city is to do these meetings in person. So, but I'll ask. Yeah. Any other questions? We went a little long, I'm sorry. I can be long-winded sometimes. So with that said, we'll adjourn the meeting. And generally speaking, we can just adjourn, I guess, tonight. That's not a big deal. So we'll adjourn the meeting. It's over at 7, whatever the time is, 56 p.m. I appreciate y'all's time. I would love for you all, I don't know, did the folks that got shirts, So that means you did something on the pre-work. Did you all do these volunteer background check things?
Oh, I thought there was one form for that we had to sign in person.
Yes, okay, just making sure that you didn't like sign electronically. So there's a volunteer background check. You have to have a background.
It's on the link that you sent, so I did it online.
But there was
You have to have
the online one, but there was a
in-person
separate form.
signature.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so before we leave tonight, I need you to fill this out for me. And I can try to do my best to answer any questions. But if you have super hard ones, I might need to get back to you. Not gonna lie. So hopefully that's okay. All right, so I'll pass these around. You can sign those, do a couple that way. And I'll get that over to, I gotta give those to Rachel. If I don't, she might not be happy with me, but there's that. And then I sent the link out to you all. I think there's a questionnaire piece on there. We'll go over that new commissioner orientation as well. But then you're gonna get one of these really cool Roseville shirts. So we gotta make sure y'all get those done.
Are we handing these back to you?
Oh, I gotta sign one. Yes, I'll take one and I'll sign one for you to take on.
You sign both of them or just one?
Well,